Iswaya, Lorna, so happy to bring you in. We're gonna have you unmute too. And Lorna Williams, and her Hulamuksqui is Wanotsa, Wanotsa,
Manosa.
Wanotsa, as Lil Walt from Mount Currie, BC. She has devoted her life to promoting, restoring, and saving Indigenous languages and knowledge as at home and throughout the world. Lorna was part of the movement to bring education back home in the early 1970s. Not only did she help develop the teaching methods of her language, Lorna worked in a large urban school district to improve the educational experience of Indigenous learners. She has served in BC Ministry of Education and ended her work career as a Canada Research Chair and Associate Professor at the University of Victoria. Lorna was honored with an Order of British Columbia in 1993, an honorary degree from SFU, and an Inspire Award recognizing her contributions to education. She is now the proud practicing grandmother and of an active 2.5-year-old grandson, her most cherished work. Hey. So all my relations, and I'm going to pass the feather to Dr. Lorna Williams.
Thank you. Kukstum kika. Kukstum kalab takamui. Tlakalap ljauna kamuh mintwala. Ljauna titamiyksha ki lakwanina esquimalt muta songis muta ti ki rusanacha shwaan. Tilko lilwat ula shwaash shnuknukba. It's a real pleasure and a real honor for me to come to spend time with you this morning and to share with you. And I hope that that I will try to add new things to what I spoke to you about. But there are lots of things I think that I can share that even if they're repetitious from the last time I spoke with you, they're important. I want to thank Yvonne for all the words that she shared with us, the teachings, and because there's so much of what she said that is also, I think you'll see reflected in the time that I have with you. This we are in the second year of the decade of Indigenous languages. And so one of the things that Yvonne said was the importance to her to learn her language. And so the UNESCO's focus on 10 years of Indigenous languages is a really important one that I'm hoping will move the conversation around the world. I have been very blessed to spend time in many parts of the world. And I want you to know that what we've experienced here in Canada is very common to Indigenous people around the world, the silencing of our knowledge. And so our work to save and to make our languages thrive is an extremely important one. And it's important for each of us to speak and to learn our languages. But I also want to tell you that it's in our words, the words that are in our languages that we can learn, and so much about our ways. And my topic today is on the tradition of community care, and which took place and was the work of everyone, and in every area of our lives. And so it's important that in the roles that we've created, that we bring into each area of work the idea of of care and self-care. Next slide, please. So this is my greeting that I shared with you. I want to acknowledge the men and the women and of all ages that are in our community, and I acknowledge for each of us to acknowledge the lands on which we're sitting today. Next slide. And I want to begin by talking about, and this is a hard one, and it's a hard one because, of we're in on the weekend of the Truth and Reconciliation, and the remembering of all of everything that has happened to us. And residential schools was one big strategy, but it was just one. There were many, many others. And I want us to think about those, because that's what we're countering with this idea of community care. And one of the first big assaults, as I guess it wasn't even the settlers yet, it was the people, looking for land, and coming from the colonizing countries, from what they brought was, the first thing that they brought was disease. And I just want you to think about the waves and waves and waves of disease that went through our nations, our communities, and our families. And I know that every one of you within your communities, there are stories that talk about these. And our people didn't ever really talk about them, because that's not our way. But it's important for us to think about them. And the diseases were the common cold. It was one of them that took people's lives because our systems were not used to this. And then, the smallpox, influenza, the venereal diseases, all those were not a part of our world. And then now it's the mental health issues that our people face. It's the diabetes that so many people our people have, and heart disease. It's because of the changes to our lifestyle. And so it's important for us to think about the assaults on our nations, our families, our spirit, because of diseases. And then there were the forced separation policies, and the forced separation policies were the ones that anyone that governments, whether they're federal government, provincial governments, territorial governments, practiced and put into place in order to separate children from their parents. And when you think about, the first teachers of a child are their siblings, their parents, their grandparents, and especially their aunts and uncles. And so there were so many ways that separated our people from one another, and separated people from our lands, and everything that we practice and what we learn as teachers is to separate children from their families, from their communities, and from their lands. It's really important to think about, just how organized that those separation policies and practices are. Another huge assault is racism, the racism that we practice, that was built on the idea right from the very beginning that we were not quite human. So this idea that indigenous peoples, and this is around the world, were considered to be not quite civilized or human. And this thought process continues and is practiced today in so many different forms. And it's something that we have to help our children know how to deal with, how to counter it, and to know that they don't need to believe what is being thrown at them through racism. The treatment is not just vocal, it's also very it's in practice, so that you don't even notice it. And hardly, it's so habituated that sometimes the practice of racism towards us, we don't even notice it anymore, because it's so normal, so common in our world. And it's something that we really, in this whole area of community care, we have to know how to deal with it. We have to know that it exists, and that we don't need to believe what we're told about ourselves. And all these practices almost made us voiceless. And for so long, we couldn't practice our ways and use our voice. And we were made to be invisible. And so all of us, I know, indigenous people who went to school, many times sat in classrooms where you were made to be invisible. Your knowledge was not accepted. Your ideas were not quite right if they weren't following the white way. And for so long, we became storyless, and so we didn't appear. Our ideas didn't appear. We didn't appear in our literature that we read as children or even as adults. It's only recently that that our stories are being shared on the media and shared in books, and so that people can see themselves. And it was almost, we were rendered purposeless, because we were locked in our communities, and we couldn't be on the land. For so many of us couldn't be on the land anymore, and so and our ceremonies were silenced, and so it gave us a sense that we were purposeless. Next slide, please. So the legacy of all of those is invisibility, and of our indigenous knowledge and wisdom. It became invisible not just to the outside world, but even to us. And and that's something that we're rebuilding, and the work that you're doing is protecting that. And so we're making our knowledge and our wisdom visible again through teachings, through ceremonies, through gatherings, and we're also changing the idea of devaluation. And so that when we're working with our people in our communities, when we're working with children, especially when we're working with our knowledge and our wisdom, we're saying these are of value to us and to the world. And for example, last night on the news, they talked about they were talking about the care for of the forests and the lands because of fires. And this is something that our people have been talking about for a long time. But it was a white man who was sharing all these strategies of caring, of burning, as a strategy to protect our fires. And I was thinking as I was listening to the story that it's the only reason why now it's okay to talk about burning as a strategy is because it's a white man talking, a white and educated man. But then in the story, they talked about the long tradition of burning by Indigenous people, the careful burning to and its purpose. And so I think it's changing, it's beginning to, and it's because of people like all of you that are changing this idea of devaluing our knowledge and our wisdom. Our knowledge and our wisdom was also made to be irrelevant, and it was said to be unnecessary, and that's totally untrue. And it's as we're beginning to find, so the work of bringing our knowledge and our wisdom back to the front is really, really important. It's our knowledge and our wisdom was demeaned. It was thought to be, it's, for example, it's taken up until very recently for our knowledge and our wisdom to be used in schools and to be brought to schools and to universities and colleges, and also to be published in books. And this is a real challenge. And because it's always thought that our knowledge and wisdom is not quite worth it. Fear and abhorrence of our practices is still written by researchers and used in schools. Mistrust, we can't trust our knowledge and our wisdom, and is also an idea that is part of our world. Next slide, please. And so the
Lorna,
disruption
sorry, I'm just going to give you your quick time check. I know we got started a little late, so it's fine if we go over a little bit as well.
Okay, I'm going to. So I'm not going to cover all of this. We'll continue on to the next slide, please. So we need to shift these, and we need to, because what is shifted is our tradition is oral, and we told stories. We shared knowledge through stories, through songs, through our dances, and through our prayers and through our conversation. We have in my language the idea, for example, of shkokokal. And shkokokal means stories, the stories that we would tell about our lands and about things every day. And we learned, our children learned, everybody learned from those stories. And what did they, and so it shifted to a literate tradition, which changes our tradition, a tradition of knowledge. And so we need to understand that there is this shift. We went from sharing to saving, and so that in all of the traditions in our communities, our families, the way we cared for each other was to share everything. There were some things that were individually, privately kept, but mostly those were because of tradition. It's sharing was the key, and so we need to understand that and to continue that and to continue to teach that. communal relations shifted to individualism, and everything that we learn and we practice through everything that we do today it focuses on individualism, and that's the pain and the hurt of the world today. And so we need to be able to remember and to bring back our communal relations. And in everything that I've been seeing and reading recently, people are finally beginning to see the importance of community and caring for each other. It's also the social order is that has been imposed needs to be shifted. In everything that we learn today, there's the idea that you're better than me, and and um, and you're more important than me, and it's always you are more important, not ever that I am important. And so, and everything that we do, it creates that social order of hierarchical importance. And that's a shift that we need to make back to our ways, which is that everybody is important, and everybody is special. Returning to community and to our world is really key. Next slide, please. So teaching and learning in family and community, these are the things that that were taught in our families, in our communities. We were taught to work hard. We had to work hard because land work is really hard. We were taught to persist, to keep at the job until it was done. And learning self-discipline was really, really important to motivate oneself. There are lots of words in our languages that teach us that how to motivate ourselves, how to keep ourselves going, and to direct ourselves, and to have consistent effort was extremely important. And I guess one of the most important is responsibility, that we have responsibility to ourselves, to each other, and we learn this from a very, very young age. It becomes a part of our way of life. And to be able to cooperate, to work together, to support one another is extremely important. And being committed to working together, having that commitment of care and of each other is so key. Having mutual respect, knowing that that people respect each other, and we have a high rate of tolerance, and of when things are not quite working, we can continue on. Next slide, please. So it's really important, oftentimes when we talk about community and community care, that we think that we don't think about individuals, but in our world, and Yvonne mentioned this, that every individual, every person has a gift that they bring to the world, and to the family, and to the community. And so, and every individual, every person is unique, is different from the other, and this is to be celebrated, it's to be honored. And that uniqueness, those differences of gifts that we bring to the world, is what makes our community stronger. And it makes our community stronger when we know how to share the gifts that we bring to the world. And that means that the family, the community, the elders, must help each person, each child, recognize, appreciate the gifts they bring to the world. Thank you. Next slide. And so it's really important that we know that there is women's knowledge and wisdom, and we see it in our families, in our communities, and it's important that we celebrate and we acknowledge that that women bring wisdom into the world that is really, really unique to that to women. Next slide, please. And that men also bring knowledge and wisdom to the world that is very unique to them, and it's important, it's special, and it's needed. So both are needed. Next slide. And so sharing our ways of knowing and sharing it freely, completely, and in community is an important way of learning and teaching and being. Next slide. So sharing and working together and I want you to know that I want you to think about your communities, the times when people come and they work together. Because when they're working together, they bring their stories, their songs, their knowledge, and their wisdom as they work, and it makes the work much more pleasant and in a community form. Next slide. In my language, we have the word khishkhish, and khishkhish is that every person is responsible for their own learning and finding the answers and knowing, and this is an important part of this idea, knowing how to fit into the community. You have to place yourself in the community, and we have to know how to do that, and we need to know that that's an important part of who we are. And there's a term in my language, ushanchut, that is really important, that people really watched out for people who set themselves aside, and then they worked very quietly and very almost unnoticeably. They work to bring that person back into the circle. And so knowing that sometimes there are times when we put ourselves aside, we put ourselves outside of the circle, and it's important to know that our community will bring us back. Next slide. Kamukhata is the energy that flows when people are together. See how all these people are working together? They're using their skills and their knowledge to do the job and to work to make it happen, and everybody contributes. Next slide, please. Telling my story, knowing my story is really important. Having many opportunities to be able to share and to hear from one another. Hearing and listening is as important as the telling. And next slide, please. So having many of those opportunities is important. This is another term from my language, katila. And so it's finding the stillness and the quietness amidst our busyness and need to know. And you do this and you learn this by helping yourself and each other to focus and to remain calm as you do tasks. Next slide, please. Mhaka, and this is a term that I heard all the time, that people noticed when people's hands were doing a good job and a complete job, and so people noticed this, and in work that is being shared. Next slide, please. Reconnecting and remembering, and together in a community is really important. So spending time together, in each of our villages, each of our communities, that when people come together, that it's an important time. And your coming together, learning together is really important to do it in community. Next slide, please. And so it helps then to know who I am. Our identity is extremely important, and our names, the names that we have, are important, and that because our names connect us to our ancestors, they connect us to the lands, our stories that are told about our names and are really important, the stories from our families. The land connection is really important. My grandson, I had his umbilical cord put onto our land in a special place, and that will connect him always to our lands, and he'll feel it. Our ceremonies help us to know who we are and our place and our shared place in our communities and in our world. They connect us to our ancestors, from times um, elsewhere, and they also connect us to our descendants, to the people who will come after us. And so we're in a line, and in this universe. Our songs help us to know who we are, and we can feel it. We can feel the togetherness in our songs and our drumming. I talked about the connections to the ancestors. Our languages help us to know who we are, and that's why it's so important that we keep our languages thriving. Next slide, please. So our languages, and again, Yvonne, this is building on what Yvonne said. So our Uhualmich is people language in my language. It's our languages nurture the well-being of ourselves and our communities. They reclaim our histories, and our languages house our knowledge and our connections. It houses our wisdom and our values, and the values that we hold dear, which is, and community care is one of those values. The principles for good living and good minds and good hearts and hands are embedded in our languages. Next slide, please. So we can find our ways through that. Building a supportive community is always a key part of everything we do. And which has been dismantled, and we need to rebuild. We learn by doing and experiencing together. We learn and build supportive communities by telling stories, by listening to laughter. And I want you to think about and remember times when people come together in your families and in your communities. What do? They tell stories, they tell jokes, they laugh, and it's in that laughter and sharing that is so much care and healing. And we can share our fears, our hopes, our visions, our cautions, our hurts, our ideas, our frustrations, when we're in a safe place to be able to do these things. And so the community structures that we create need to be able to create those spaces that we can deal with these very human things. We need to be able to take the time to hear each other, to open the space to really hear one another, building community, having the support to build those communities, and open the doors, and being open to change. And it's really important sometimes. One of the things that we've learned, um, because of the ways that we were treated, and because of the ways of the Euro-Western world, it can lead us to put each other down, and to negatively and harshly criticize one another's ideas. And it's important to give different ideas, but not to do that by putting others down. And so we need to be cautious about that. Okay, next slide, please. So relationship care, and through ceremonies, through teaching, learning, community gatherings, life transitions, is a really important part of our ways, and which got put aside. And I know that people are bringing them back, but acknowledging and recognizing the life transitions is extremely important. And another thing is gratitude, to give thanks, in all of our ceremonies and all of our beginnings. When we begin any gathering, we talk about thankfulness and gratitude. And that's really important to knowing, to valuing ourselves, to valuing each other, to valuing whatever comes our way. And so gratitude is very, very important. So giving thanks. Humbleness is important, and also that space and time in our culture is different from what is promoted by the Euro-Western world. And it's important that we know that relationship care has a very different space and time aspect to it, knowing that that exists, in our connections to our ancestors. Next slide, please. So nurturing, compassion, kindness, helping, giving, caring, and sincerity is really, really key. And you can see all of these take place in our gatherings when we come together in a good way, and when we celebrate and do ceremony for our lives and for our existence. All of these are part of that. Next slide. And language use for well-being, and I talked already about humor, the importance of humor, and that's in all of our languages. There's a very unique sense of humor that's embedded in our language. Being close together and sharing. The idea of "I see you" is really important. And when people say when people say my name, Wanosa, they see me, but they see me in connection to all the people who've held that name, and what it means. And so in the gatherings that we hold, language is really, really important. There's so much we can learn from the animals and from plants that we know that are embedded in our languages. Celebrations. And there's a special, I told you about the Kokolin form of stories. There's another form of story called Shpatakl, and the Shpatakl are the teaching stories. And it's really important that we spend time with those teaching stories to see to see how they're used, how they were used, and what we can learn from them. Next slide, please. So that's it. Thank you very much. I know I went over time, and I want to thank you for your generosity in letting me do that. And so, Nishti.
So, Lorna, thank you so much. And you were really quite fast, and you did not go over time at all. So thank you very
Oh, good.
much. You still had a good 8 minutes left, but that's all good. And your teachings were amazing. And if there's any questions, let me know.
So you do have a
I
few
see a
minutes
lot
for
of thank yous
questions.
and excellent presentation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I could listen to Lorna and Auntie all day long. Yeah, yeah. So many thank yous. I could listen to you all day. Aw,
Yes.
thank you. Aw, and very grateful for your sharing, and makes my heart happy. Thank you for attending this presentation. That was from Bahar. Great slides. There was a question if your slides are shareable, if you want those shared, or are those your very own personal?
They're my own, but yeah, but everything I own, I share.
Oh, yeah, of course I. So yeah. Thank you, Lorna. Wonderful presentation and teaching. Yeah, lots of thank yous. Oh, sorry. Oh, somebody's okay. Miigwech for all you do for the languages in BC and nationally. You inspire with your wisdom and guidance. Thank you, Lorna. So grateful to have the opportunity to listen and learn from you. Kleklo for sharing your teachings. Such a great presentation. Thank you for all your words. I raise my hands up to you. I hold you up. Thank you so much. I will share everything that I've learned here today.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really enjoyed your presentation, how you bring the information in a warm and positive way. So thank you very much.
And it's okay to hear, and it's okay to hear it over and over again. More than once. Yes, thank you. As our elder said.
Musi, thank you for sharing. Thank you so much. The community is very happy. You've raised everybody up in a good way, and thank you. We so appreciate what you've done and what you've taught here today. And the fact that, you know, when we work together and we reiterate things together, let's sit closer, Auntie. Right. So, and to have two sisters like you as our pillars is such an honor, and I'm so grateful, you know, to be a humble, you know, student at this moment and in this time. And yeah, so Yathu Kwasai, and we'll let you have your moments back into your life, and you know, we wish you all the best and a happy journey today, and you know, and light steps out there in the world today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I lift you up. Salama.